The hiss of escaping air jolted Ren from a long stretch of dreamless darkness. His eyelids felt weighed down by centuries of frozen sleep, yet as the pressurized seal finally released, he forced them open. There was a flickering ceiling light far above, a single stuttering bulb that bathed the corridor with a yellowish glow. Ren remained in his pod for an extra moment, collecting himself, as the interior lighting of his chamber adjusted to match his revived vital signs. He took several sharp breaths, reacquainting himself with the art of inhaling and exhaling, feeling his lungs expand after too many months, years even without use. When his vision stopped wobbling, he saw the others rousing in their pods as well. Distinctive silhouettes lined the narrow corridor cavern, each curved cryo-chamber arranged in neat rows. Half of the pod's occupant lights were glowing green, indicating successful thaw and stable reading. Others flickered yellow, meaning uncertain vitals. And at the far edge, Ren's heart sank as he noticed a few pods with no light at all. He tried not to think about those who had likely perished in cryo-sleep. Instead, he concentrated on checking his own body. He flicked a gloved finger across the small screen near his wrist. According to his suit's sensors, his temperature was warming steadily, but his heart rate was still high. That was normal after cryo, or so they'd been told. But the familiar adrenaline spike of being thrown back into a brutal, ravaged Earth refused to subside. The cryo-chamber's hatch opened. Ren carefully stepped down onto the metallic grating. Dizziness hit him, causing him to grip the edge of the pod for support. Across the chamber he spotted his partner, Mari, also stepping out. Her pale face was drained of color, making her dark hair stand out like a stain against a white sheet. She caught sight of him and jerked her head in what passed for a greeting in their post-cryogenic exhaustion. Something began to beep, and voices crackled through their earpieces as the automated system booted to life. Revival phase complete. Please proceed to Distribution Bay D for resource briefing, said the androgynous voice of an AI, lacking emotion. Biometric scanning to commence in T-5 minutes. Ren gave Mari a nod and began walking, letting the cryosuit's carbon weave adjust to his movement. They had practiced this routine dozens of times in training, awaken, reorient, get new instructions from the AI. In theory, those instructions would help them survive outside the bunker for a few days, gather supplies, and then return before the next wave of the plague-ridden atmosphere took hold. The corridor ended in a large steel door, marked by a flaking sign proclaiming Distribution Bay D. Ren placed his palm against the scanner. It tried to read his prints, but the system stuttered. He tried again, and finally, with a reluctant beep, the door slid open. The distribution bay was a cramped space lined with lockers. Each contained suits, oxygen masks, canisters, medical supplies, whatever had been allocated for the next foray into the outside world. Same procedure as always, Mari said, her voice rasping, though I suspect outside's gotten worse again. Ren shrugged. We'll see soon enough. He reached for a container of decontamination gel, rubbing it over his gloved hands in a ritual half for cleanliness, half for superstition. Prolonged cryosleep could do strange things to the mind, but they both wanted to cling to some semblance of control. One by one, others shuffled into the distribution bay, their eyes glazed with a mixture of dread and determination. Their names flickered across Ren's helmet visor, scanned automatically by the bunker's system. Hallie Winters, Mikhail Trotsky, Ranjit Singh, Ava Carter, Yuan Yu. Some nodded in silent greeting. They were the ones who had survived enough cycles to know that bonding was a luxury. Here, survival overshadowed everything else. Testing your comms, Mari said, pressing a button on her forearm console. A faint beep sounded in Ren's earpiece in confirmation. Everyone else simultaneously tapped at their own suit's control pads to ensure they could still communicate. The visor data scrolled with environmental readouts, though it had precious little to show, mostly question marks until they actually stepped outside. They formed a rough circle around the center of the distribution bay. A battered console rose from the floor, distributing mission objectives. A robotic arm extended, offering each of them a small palm-sized block of hardened nutrient rations and 4 polished vials of anti-plague serum. The AI's voice returned, monotonous as ever. Deploy Team 7. Proceed to the eastern outskirts for resource retrieval from Supply Cache 41. Mission priority: secure seeds, medical supplies, cryo-capsules as needed. Time outside, 12 hours. Return deadline without fail. Maurice scoffed lightly. They always say without fail. It's not like we get much choice. Wren knew she was right. If they didn't return before the timer, the bunker's automated life support system would shut them out. That was the cold logic of the system, meant to preserve the few who remained. Opening too long would risk contamination from the swirling, plague-laden air. No matter how well sealed their suits might be, the bunkers were all that remained for humanity to outlast the genetically mutated pathogens raging across the planet. One by one, they checked their gear. Oxygen filters in place, serum injections ready, nutrient ration attached to belts. The overhead lights flickered again, a slow strobe that made the bay look like a grim disco floor. Then, the ground shook with a dull rumble, the bunker shifting from some unknown quake or distant explosion. It subsided quickly, leaving them with pounding hearts. Mikhail gave a shaky grin. Just Earth's way of saying good morning. No one laughed. Wren pressed his hand to the door leading outside, steeling himself. Beyond that airlock lay an expanse of devastation. What used to be cities, forests, oceans transformed into a lethal environment. While the plague had wiped out most humans or forced them into cryo-sleep bunkers, it also targeted any living tissue, mutated animals, twisted plant life. That was all that roamed the surface now, and these intermittent earth tremors only added to the danger. "All right," Wren said, drawing in a breath. "Let's go." The airlock door slid aside. A second, thicker door followed. A wave of dusty light spilled into the corridor as Wren led the group outside. A hazy sky greeted them, tinged gray-brown with swirling flecks of debris. The sun was only a dim, flickering disk behind the filth, offering a meager hint of warmth. Two ravaged skyscrapers stood in the distance like skeletons. Their spires snapped. The ground was littered with rubble and the twisted remains of vehicles. Fissures scarred the earth, some venting ominous steam. The swirling dust caught in the cracks of Wren's visor, leaving a fine grit that his suit's auto-wipe system struggled to remove. Activating his environmental scanning, Wren waited. The display remained unsteady, refusing to yield a stable number. Then an alert popped up. Air toxicity, extreme. Mutation rate, accelerated. He frowned. Each time they woke, it seemed the outside world was more corrupted than before, but they had a mission. Seeds, medical supplies, cryocapsules. Renew the bunkers, keep them stable, keep humanity alive for just a while longer. It was all they had left. The group moved in single file, suits hissing with each breath, guided by the faint tracking beacon that marked supply cache 41. No one spoke for some time. The wind was their only companion, moaning across the ruins like a forlorn ghost. Mari glanced over her shoulder repeatedly, scanning for movement beyond the debris. Wren nodded at her caution. In this environment, there could be mutated wild dogs or something worse, prowling behind an overturned bus or collapsed building. Early in the plague's spread, survivors documented bizarre transformations, animals with extra limbs, or plants that fed on flesh. The plague mutated anything organic it could latch onto, twisting it into lethal shapes. He signaled for the group to hold. Mari sidled up to him. "What is it?" Wren squinted at the remains of a collapsed highway overpass, half shrouded in swirling dust. Something about it seemed off. The dust was swirling in a pattern not entirely guided by the wind. It had a rhythm, like it was responding to a pulse. Then he spotted it, a movement among the concrete slabs. A shape that slunk low, elongated, too large to be an ordinary dog. Its eyes reflected a weird glow. He motioned for everyone to move slowly to the right, stick to a chunk of collapsed wall for cover, and wait. The creature sniffed the air, turned, and let out a raspy hiss. It wasn't shaped like any typical canine. The front half was covered in patchy fur, while the rear looked nearly reptilian. Mari cringed. The mutated beast's hiss continued. Then it did something strange. It rose on ungainly hindquarters, scanning the horizon. Wren, holding his breath, hoped the suit's sealed design would mask their scent enough. The creature growled, uncertain. It prowled closer, stepping among the rubble, sniffing the air for prey. The group remained deadly still, mere meters away, hearts hammering. Then, with a final grunt, the beast found no direct sign of them, no movement or sound. Deciding there were easier hunts elsewhere, it turned and slunk off toward a skeleton of a building. Everyone exhaled in relief, continuing their route after waiting a few precious seconds. They trudged for nearly an hour before glimpsing the location of the cache, a half-buried entrance protruding from the ground, battered by debris. At some earlier point, it must have been an underground storehouse or emergency supply shelter. Now, only a twisted metal door remained visible above the rubble. "Let's make this quick," Ren said, stepping forward. "The quake or something else might have damaged the entry. We can't afford to linger if it's compromised." They formed a perimeter while Mikhail and Ava attempted to hack the rusted lock mechanism. The wind howled, overhead clouds swirling menacingly. Ren kept scanning the horizon. Nearly every shape looked like it could be something dreadful. His eyes flicked to the suit's timer, just under 10 hours left. They had to be back before then. A sharp crackle sounded in his earpiece, making him flinch. "I've almost got it," said Ava's voice. Behind her, Mikhail cursed softly at the flickering control panel. Finally, a green light flashed, and with a metallic groan, the sealed door slid open enough for one person to slip through. Ren squeezed through the gap first. Inside was mostly darkness, stale air jammed thick with dust. He tested the air for toxicity levels. It was still dangerous but less so than outside. Sorting through the gloom, he noticed large sealed barrels, likely meant for seed storage. They followed the corridor deeper, passing crates with flicking hazard labels. Their flashlights illuminated a cluster of supply capsules. Relief soared through the group at the sight of precious resources. Dried seeds in vacuum-packed canisters, medical kits tucked into shock-resistance crates, and best of all, replacement cryo-capsules for the bunkers. They carefully scanned for contamination. So far, the readings looked promising. Each person began collecting supplies, scanning barcodes, ensuring the correct items made it onto the retrieval manifest. Ren was struck by the weight of it all. These seeds might be some last hope for farmland once, if ever, the plague died out. These medical kits might stave off new mutations, and the cryo-capsules could keep more humans alive for the next cycle. A sudden overhead light flickered. Then a generator somewhere rumbled weakly, possibly an old backup system. As the corridor blinked with faint illumination, Ren found himself gazing at a row of steel doors along a side hallway. They looked like smaller cryo-chambers or an offshoot for additional storage. He hesitated, scanning them as curiosity tugged at him. "Check it out?" Mari asked. He nodded. They moved toward the doors, stepping over strewn cables. The thick dust suggested the area hadn't been disturbed in ages. One door, slightly ajar, revealed a small chamber with a single capsule and a control panel blinking a slow red. The screen's text, though faded, read, "Subsystem malfunction emergency, stasis incomplete." Ren's heart pounded. Stasis incomplete? That could mean someone inside died, or they woke too early to face the plague alone. Mari wiped some dust off the capsule's glass. Within it lay a man, pale-skinned, eyes closed, though not in the typical frosted cryo look. The sealing mechanism was half-scorched, maybe from an electrical surge. He looked as though he had once been in cryo sleep, but had emerged at the wrong time. A single faint beep on the control panel indicated minimal life signs. "Should we open it?" Mari asked softly. Ren hesitated. The bunker's protocols focused on preserving known survivors, not risking themselves to save an unknown stowaway, but the guilt set in. What if they just left him here to die because that was easiest? "We check if he's stable," Ren decided, carefully pressing the override. He suspected they had limited time for this detour, but something in him refused to leave a fellow human, perhaps the last in this entire region, behind. The capsule door hissed open. The man's eyelids fluttered, revealing bloodshot eyes. They darted around in confusion. Mari quickly administered a small injection of an anti-mutagenic serum, uncertain if it would even help. The man rasped in a voice that seemed parched from years of dryness. "Where am I?" Rin knelt beside him. "A supply bunker, friend. We're from Bunker Delta. Whoever you are will try to help." The man's gaze drifted away, as if grappling with a memory that wouldn't come. He muttered something about shadows outside, his voice trembling. Mari looked at Ren, worry etched on her face. Mikhail called out from somewhere behind them. "We need help loading the crates. We're on the clock." Ren nodded in acknowledgement. Turning back to the man, he said, "Can you walk?" The man gave a weak nod and tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. With the man's arm draped around Ren's shoulder, they made their way back, stepping carefully around debris. They reached the main storage area again. Ava was securing the crates to a small trolley. Ranjit and Yuan were double-checking for contamination. Mari, meanwhile, administered more serum to their new companion, striving to keep him conscious. The man whispered his name, Felix. Felix Moore. "All right, Felix," Ren said. "We'll take you to the bunker, but your body's been outside the official cryo-cycles for a while. We don't know your last injection date. We'll have to keep you quarantined, but it's safer than here." Felix's eyes fluttered again. "Yes," he breathed. "Please." They'd nearly finished sealing the supply crates when a thunderous crash reverberated from above. Dust rained down, and panic fluttered across the group. Something was happening on the surface. Maybe the mutated beast returned, or a quake was opening new fissures. "We've got what we can," Maurice said urgently. They started pushing the trolley back toward the exit. Another tremor shook the place, deeper this time, tangling wires and knocking a few crates from the stack. A chunk of the ceiling collapsed in the hallway, narrowly missing Mikhail. They rushed faster, dragging the supplies along. By the time they reached the metal door, it was jammed against debris. Ava wrestled with the control panel, her brow furrowed. Several frantic moments passed. She cursed under her breath. Rin motioned for Ranjit. "We might have to force it." The two men pressed their combined weight against the door, groaning with effort. Slowly, with puffs of dust, the door inched open. The corridor outside flickered under the wounded sunlight. At least they weren't completely trapped. The group emerged, quickly scanning their surroundings. The howling wind had intensified, swirling with a fresh storm of debris. Overhead, the sky churned with new thunderheads, tinted violet. A bizarre hue that might indicate further contamination. Hard to say. "Move fast," Ren ordered. "That storm might carry the plague in heavier concentrations." They formed a tight column, pushing the trolley, each scanning different arcs of the environment. The suit's timer read 7 hours left until lockdown. If they hurried, they could make it back in half that time. Felix stumbled at Ren's side. Despite the serum, he was clearly in poor shape. That spurred Ren to move quicker. They navigated the broken landscape, passing rusted vehicles. Occasionally the ground shook with distant tremors. They saw no sign of the mutated creature from before, though it hardly set them at ease. Pushing onward, they skirted a collapsed tower. The group heard a faint scraping behind them. Mari raised her rifle, scanning the area. Something large was bounding toward them. Ren recognized the elongated shape and twisted limbs. It was the same type of mutated beast, but bigger, maybe part of a pack that prowled these ruins. "Eyes forward! Run!" Rin shouted, grabbing the trolley's handle. The group broke into a hurried sprint. Suits hissing, Felix stumbled, and Mari grabbed his arm, nearly dragging him. The mutated creature snarled, closing in. Rin glimpsed its maw, wide, dripping with thick saliva, teeth glinting like jagged shards. Mikhail and Ava fired sporadically, the rifle's muffled pops echoing in the dust-laden air. The shots connected with the monster's shoulder, but it kept charging, letting out a piercing wail. Another creature leaped from behind a wrecked bus, flanking them, forcing them into a narrow path between crumpled metal. "Keep moving," Mari shouted. She pumped a shot into the second creature's throat, causing it to stagger. It thrashed wildly, screeching in pain. Meanwhile, the first beast circled behind a collapsed van, planning another leap. Ren's mind raced. These creatures were cunning, possibly more intelligent than their bestial appearance implied. He quickly gestured for the group to circle up, placing the trolley in the middle. They fired short bursts, aiming carefully. Ranjit's shot clipped the first beast's hind leg, causing it to limp. Seizing the chance, Mikhail delivered a final, direct shot that dropped it to the ground. The second creature, gravely wounded by Mari's blast, slunk away, its screeches fading in echo. The group exchanged glances, hearts pounding. They had expended more ammo than they would have liked. The environment was growing gloomier by the minute as the swirling storm overhead darkened the sky. For the next half hour they made steady progress, scanning the environment, pushing the trolley and supporting Felix. Finally, in the distance, they glimpsed the squat, bunker-like shape of Bunker Delta's entrance. Just as more tremors rattled the earth, dust flared up, and the group flattened themselves against an upright fragment of reinforced concrete. Beyond that was the bunker's main gate, sealed tight, waiting. "Not much time left," Ava said, her voice tense over the comm. "We have 4 hours until lockdown." Rin urged them forward, crossing the final stretch of broken asphalt. The bunker's imposing steel gate loomed, reminiscent of a fortress. Once at the entrance, Mari quickly punched in the security codes. The first door slid open with a squeal. They crowded inside the airlock chamber. Everyone felt that rush of reprieve as the outer door closed behind them, blocking out the toxic wind. The interior sensors scanned the group for contamination, a mechanical voice stated. "Decontamination commencing. Please stand still." Multiple vents hissed, spraying the corridor with a fine mist. The silicon layers on their suits and gear repelled the antiseptic, while any stray plague particles hopefully died under the chemical wash. Rin resisted the urge to wipe his visor, knowing it would soon auto-clear. Felix swayed on his feet through the entire process, the serum only partially stabilizing him. Ren was relieved to see the final scan show no immediate infection, but for safety, they'd place Felix in a quarantine chamber. Perhaps the doctors, whatever remained of them, could treat him. When the second door opened, they were greeted by the bunker corridors, the harsh fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Technicians and medics waited anxiously, their faces masked by rebreathers. The group unloaded the crates, checking them off against the mission data. With the seeds, medical kits, and cryo-capsules in hand, they had fulfilled their objective to keep the bunker population going for another cycle. A tall man in a white lab coat approached, scanning them each with a handheld device. "Welcome back. We've prepared a quarantine sleeping chamber for Felix. We'll examine him and try to integrate him into our schedules." Rin nodded. He gently guided Felix to a rolling medical gurney. The man's voice was rasping again. "Thank you." And then he slipped into unconsciousness, either from relief or exhaustion. The medics rushed him away. The rest of them turned their gear over for cleaning and reclamation. With the meltdown of civilization ages ago, every resource had to be meticulously recycled. Ren felt numb, part exhaustion, part relief that they'd made it back before lockdown. Another successful retrieval, minimal casualties, essential supplies in hand. But the lumps in his throat told him how precarious hope was, how it hinged on missions like these continuing indefinitely. Mari walked beside him toward the cryo-sleep corridor. She didn't even bother removing her suit's outer layer yet. "You know they'll put us under again soon," she murmured. "Another cycle, until the next big supply run or crisis," Ren nodded. "At least we keep surviving. Long enough, maybe, for a cure or for the plague to burn itself out." He paused, letting out a shaky breath. "Or for us to adapt." She shrugged. "Yeah, that's what we always hope." Ahead of them, a row of pods gleamed under the corridor's cold light. Technicians busily calibrated them, preparing for the return of their battered inhabitants. Mikhail, Ava, Ranjit, and Yuen had already crowded around their respective pods, hooking tubes to infusion ports, recharging the pods with fresh cryo-capsules from the supply run. Without those capsules, the next cycle of sleep would not be possible. The plague outside was too virulent to attempt any normal living conditions. Ren remembered how the bunkers had once been full of all sorts of experts, doctors, scientists, engineers, desperate to find a solution, but the plague mutated too quickly, evading every vaccine. So humans retreated to cryosleep, hoping the plague would eventually lose momentum, or that future technology would rescue them. Yet year after year, they woke, found the surface still hostile, then retreated again, repeating in an endless cycle. He thought of Felix, the man from the defunct bunker. Could it be that, somewhere else, others had survived in smallpox? Would that be enough to rebuild once the plague receded? Clinging to that fragile hope, Ren peeled off the top portion of his suit as a technician approached with sedation serum and a small measuring device. He stepped into the open cryopod, letting his body rest against the padded interior. The sedation formula was injected automatically as the pod's mechanical arms clicked in word. He felt the cool liquid seep into his veins, making his limbs heavy. Over the pod's threshold, he locked eyes with Mari, who was stepping into the neighboring chamber. Wordlessly, they gave each other a look that conveyed both comfort and resignation. The glass hatch of the cryopod hummed as it lowered, sealing him in. A vacuum hiss followed, and the system readouts showed it preparing the cryogenic environment. Ice prickled at the edges of Ren's consciousness. Within moments, a deep drowsiness overtook him. In that space between waking world and induced slumber, scattered thoughts danced across his mind. The outside world, blasted by plague, was probably still decaying. Yet each time they woke, they found some glimmer of life, enough to keep going. Perhaps the earth itself had a plan for them, or maybe it was all just prolonging the inevitable. Still, as the cold enveloped him, he latched onto one last comforting thought. They had saved Felix. The team had come back alive. The seeds were secure. Maybe, just maybe, the next time they woke, the world would take one step closer to being livable again. Or perhaps not. But he would dream anyway, locked in the freezing embrace of the only refuge left. The sedation pulled him under, and he let himself drift into the silent darkness that had become humanity's haven, trusting the cryo chamber with the last spark of hope he had left.